Hello everybody, and welcome to another episode of your weekly dose of Terraform. My name is the same, Anton Babenko, and today we have a special episode again. Well, every episode is special, but today we have a special guest who is a very well-known person in Terraform AWS provider development, and we will have a discussion with him in a few minutes. And we will go through different aspects related to the development of Terraform provider. And the things which I want to go before that is pretty much traditional. I want to go through different things which are relevant for the community, and specifically I want to talk about some news from the trenches, as people tend to call them. So to do that in the best possible way, I need to share my screen. And I do this like this. Oh my god, it works. So M0 is again the sponsor of this episode. So if you don't know what is it, you have to go to m0.com/Anton, and I can give you a very short introduction. What is it? So when you have your infrastructure as code described as Terraform configuration files, you probably still want to make sure that policies and governance is applied, and you have actually a good control over costs. So if you go to m0.com/Anton, you can register for free, and you can connect your GitHub account, and you can see how M0 is taking care of CI/CD steps for your infrastructure as code. Well, thanks a lot to M0 for the support, and I think they're doing a lot of interesting things. So one more thing which is relevant. Well, next week is going to be AWS reInvent. For those who don't know, AWS reInvent is a pretty big event, and you can register for free if you go to Google and search for AWS reInvent, sign up. I want to mention that there will be something like 1,800 different talks during next 3 weeks, because the whole event is going to be for 3 weeks. During these 3 weeks, there will be a lot of announcements, a lot of new videos posted on YouTube or any other platform, I don't know which exactly, where you can see about all different new services which AWS is releasing. For example, you can go to cloudpegboards.com and then search for whatever you want. You may want to learn more about, well, Amplify. If you search Amplify, you will see 28 talks about Amplify, and you can just highlight them or put them into your wish list and then export them into Google Calendar and then watch them as they are going to be released. Not everything will be released at once. Of course, some of these talks will be released during first week, second or third. So if you want to stay informed about what's going on, I highly recommend this website, because it's one of not many websites which actually work. Official one doesn't work so well. So what else related to Terraform 0.14? Well, as you remember, we are still expecting to have 0.14 to be released soon. So far, there were no major addition to Terraform 0.14 since release candidate 1, and this weekend is Thanksgiving Day in US, so we don't expect anything new to be released. But nevertheless, there are some interesting things related to documentation happening in the Terraform repository. So I think next week we will see the release itself. Okay, and well, what else? As you probably understand, what sometimes was a challenge with Terraform is when you are expecting to have Terraform 0.14 to be released, and some of your projects or some parts of your projects will be possible to migrate to this version, but some parts will not be possible to migrate immediately. So Terraform 0.14 will have support for reading and writing all compatible state files, even from the future version of Terraform. So this is going to be an awesome feature in Terraform 0.14. But the same feature is going to be available inside of Terraform 0.13.6, which means that it will be possible to read files or Terraform remote state files even from the future version. And I think this is really a neat feature if you are going to migrate to next version gradually, because you cannot upgrade everything at once. So stay tuned when 0.14 will be released. I'm quite sure that 0.13.6 will be released as well, pretty much at the same time. And the last announcement which I want to make before we go into talk about Terraform AWS provider today is related to the Docker provider. Well, Docker provider, as soon as I find it, where is it? No, this is AWS. Here is it. Right. So a friend of mine who is maintaining Docker provider for several years is eagerly asking for help. So what it means is that there are a lot of people who use Docker provider already. Well, don't pay attention that it's less than 100, because this provider is actually migrating from one namespace into another namespace. So this is the right link for this provider. And again, don't pay attention that there are very few stars here, because it just changed name. It was previously in Terraform providers. And it had a little bit more stars here and much more attention over the past few years, and a lot of different contributions. So what Manuel is asking, well, Manuel is this person, he is asking for help in terms of joining maintainers and help with review of different pull requests, triage different issues, and so on. So if you want to practice with the way how open source work, and you want to help development and fix 62 issues in Terraform Docker provider, you are more than welcome. I will share this link in the description, and as you can see, everything is extremely transparent in this repository, and it will be really awesome if some of you join, and then we can move this needle further. So that's pretty much it from my side. Now I want to switch over and focus, and let's talk about Terraform AWS provider with a person who actually know what is it. Well, it's not me. Well, where is this button? If I click add left, yeah, awesome. Now,
Hey, Anton.
well, I don't know if people can hear you, because, well, can somebody confirm that you can hear Ilia? Because I hear you in my headset. Yes, we hear you. Okay, cool. Thanks, Denise. Both of you. Oh my God, it's actually working.
Can you hear me?
Yes, cool. So Denise.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we
Okay,
hear.
great.
Cool. Okay, let me. Oh my God, why it's so big? Well, we can put it. We can put it somewhere. Like this. Right. Okay. So let's start with introducing. So first of all, it's really great to have you, Ilia, with us today. I will not share my screen because it's just not possible. So I will ask you to introduce yourself, and well, how did you end up doing these awesome things?
Okay. Hey, great to be here. Really cool. I hope the show will have more nicer. I'm Ilia. I'm a software architect for Placer AI, where we deal with location-based analytics. I've been working with Terraform for the last about 3 years, where I got really into Terraform at my last job, dealing a lot with AWS. Currently, I don't deal with AWS as much, but I'm still actively contributing to the Terraform AWS provider, and sometimes when I have time for Anton's AWS modules, which are great. Actually, it was my first experience with community modules, looking at the VPC module, which I did some little work there. And then I really looked at some stuff I really needed and was lacking, and went over to look at the Terraform AWS provider code, and really got into it, and been contributing ever since for the last year or so actively.
Yeah, that's actually very great that you reminded me about VPC module, because I kind of forgot that that's the way how we were introduced to each other, because we were working on VPC module, and then you join and you decided to, oh, I will add this feature, and many other things, and it was like, wow, cool, people want to contribute. And what was really cool is that you was actually not stopping after first commit, so you was doing this quite for several times. Well, people ask, so I will put it, maybe you could make your guest louder. Well, I don't know how to do this.
I'll try to speak louder. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah. Okay. And yeah, I don't know how to do this, but yeah, as you said, well, it's it's impossible to make it. So I will just make it. Let's say 22. Okay. So yeah. So we started cooperating with Terraform AWS modules first, and then there were some missing things in provider, and that's where you transitioned, right?
Yeah. So I really needed some features like tagging for resources. We were really focused on making sure we know how much thing costs, and tagging is a great way to do that in AWS. And I was looking at WAF, Web Application Firewall, and it was missing the tagging feature. And it was actually just introduced by AWS, and the provider didn't have that. And I had no knowledge of Go. And I just thought, okay, that would be a cool thing to try. I've been working on like open source Terraform things for a while for the VPC module. And I thought, I'll just learn Go and need to do something there. So I did that for one resource. It was really not simple at first, not knowing Go and not knowing how the provider, its code style, its conventions, how to test things properly. And after doing like one PR, after a long, lengthy review, I did it for all the WAF resources. And from there, I just thought, okay, this is really fun, and I'll do it for other things that I need, and like other things I see that people need, and that's it. From there, I just went.
That's really cool that you started with solving your own needs in open source project. I wish more people are like this and more open, that you cannot just sit and wait that somebody else will go and fix your needs. But at the same time, if you are speaking about your first or like your initial contributions, where you commit some code and you spend a lot of time, and you probably was also thinking that why my awesome pull request is not being merged instantly, right? Because this is the best code ever. Like the whole internet was missing this piece of code, and now everything is just waiting. So what was your first impression, or how do you think it was? Like, did you also expect that your pull request is going to be merged instantly, or what was your expectation?
So yes and no. Before I started contributing, I wasn't sure how to do it. I wasn't actually very familiar with GitHub and pull requests. I was familiar with other tools. And I started looking at other open source repositories. Of course, I looked at the Terraform modules and some things more related to Go code. And I saw things. I was also initially surprised that it's open source. It's supposed to be quick, fast review. That's all they're doing. That's their entire job. So no, I saw that a lot of projects, it takes time to approve things. They really want to test things out. It's not just junk code that gets checked in just because someone contributed it and they really want it and they really need it. But there's a balance that open source maintainers need to maintain between the quality of their product and not having people scream at them that their product is not good, and between really merging a lot of good contributions and important contributions that will help the product. Yeah, so like for me initially it took, I think, if I remember correctly, a month or two for my first pull request to be merged.
Yeah, it's. I'm quite sure that many people have the same experience. While I can say that one of the best experience which I had when I contributed to Terraform AWS provider. I mean, I didn't do any big contribution there, but I think 1 or 2 years ago there were gardening days, where people were gathering together and they were working on fixing as many open issues as possible. And during this day, a lot of HashiCorp employees were dedicated to help you with your code and with your pull request. And I remember that people who were active that day, they actually like it so much that they started contributing much more. As far as I remember, Kit was one of these guys who was leading that competition. He got something like 50 pull requests merged or issues solved during one day. And then he just decided, okay, let's go on and continue. And when you say that open source experience which you had, do you also think that overall for companies like HashiCorp, open source is playing definitely a key role, but open source as itself is not the way how company survive or how company pays the bill, right? Company builds on top of open source, build commercial products. That's why they have to really be focused on the quality. So it's like it's not number of lines which will give more money to HashiCorp. It's actually stability of the project and the flow, how contributions are being accepted, which is really important. So, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I worked at like commercial companies. I never worked for a company that has an open source product, but I can see, and from a business perspective, as you say, it doesn't pay the bills, and they have their own commercial products. And yes, this may be the backbone, and maybe that's what they started with, or a way to make the product more accessible to everyone. But at the end of the day, they have engineers that work also on their commercial products and keeping the quality, because there are people who are also paying for that product, and they expect it to not break every time they release a new version. And that's important. People who are contributing to open source have to understand that sometimes behind those products there's a company that needs to make money, that has to pay the employees, and it can't be always their top priority, even if they want to. Because I talked with a lot of folks from HashiCorp, and a lot of them said, we would love to do exclusively open source maintainership, review PRs, help people make the product better, but there's just other things we have to do, and it's understandable, and people have to make sure they keep it in the back of their mind. There's other priorities as well.
Yeah, exactly. And if we take into account two of these sides, let's say contributors who want their stuff to get merged because they're actually willing to have or to use this certain feature or fix certain bugs, and a company like HashiCorp who are actually willing to support them, but at the same time they also have a lot of other things, as you mentioned. Can you actually explain how open source contributors can, or what these open source contributors can do to get the pull request merged faster? Like, what are actually the tricks, or what are the plan? Can you explain some of this? Because you for those who don't know, Ilia fixed or merged, no, actually opened and merged more than 300 pull requests just to this AWS provider. So your experience is definitely verified at least 300 times.
Okay, yeah, sure. So obviously, and of course, this is a mistake I did as well, and many others, and that's fine. It's when people are just beginning. RTFM, look at the documentation. The folks at Hashi are working very hard to make contributions easier, and it's be better since I started working on it. So go to the GitHub repo, look at the documentation. There's a guide on how to contribute. There's on like exactly the questions you're bringing up, Anton, which are questions that are brought all the time by people. Why is my PR not being prioritized? It's really important for me, and we really need this. And I've done everything I think I should have done. So a lot of these PRs, which I reviewed some of them as well, they are not mine, are missing some basic things, and it's not like major mistakes, but it's just from the lack of really looking at what are the steps need to be done to make the maintainers' lives easier. Because if you can see at the repo, they have almost 700 open PRs that are awaiting review at any given moment, and it became bigger. It used to be a lot. It used to be 400 or like 300 plus open PRs concurrently when I started, and it just boomed, and it's crazy. And they don't have thousands of people working on this. And if you're a software engineer working at your company, and you know how many PRs open you have on your project, and how long do you have to invest in properly reviewing each and every PR, looking at the proper automation needed to help review that. So this is what Hashi is really investing into lately, is to automate things a lot better, to make the experience for the contributors easier, and of course to make the experience for them easier to review a lot of PRs. So if I have to boil it down to a list, of course, again, look at the documentation, add the proper documentation to your PR, make it explicit in your issue or PR what exactly are you fixing, because sometimes it's like fix, I don't know, something very general, and from a quick look, its maintainer can't really understand what's the point of this PR and what they're exactly fixing without really going over the code, and it's a process, and it takes time, and they have to prioritize other things. They can't invest an hour in looking into something and then saying, okay, this is not something I can really look into now because I have other things. And please be more explicit in what exactly you're fixing and what's the value, because there are things that are more prioritized by Hashi. And again, this is not like private knowledge. It's something you can see in their documentation. They have a list of core services they are prioritizing above everything, and it's like the basic networking, VPC, EC2, RDS resources, S3. These are like the main big services probably a lot of people are using, in the most common services. And these are being prioritized first. And obviously services that are almost not being used by anyone, even externally, are not being prioritized. If you have like a niche service, I don't know, having a hard time thinking of something.
GameLift.
Yeah, GameLift, and it's funny because I worked on GameLift, and it just as an exercise. And yes, I don't think there are so many users of GameLift as much as there are for S3 or Lambda or things like that. And obviously these PRs are going to be prioritized a lot lower. For the GameLift, I probably have a PR open that's been open probably for 6 months. I don't feel bad about that because it's just not as important as other things, and people have to understand that.
Well, but sorry.
Other than that, yeah.
Yeah, no, go on. I will ask later.
Yeah, yeah. Another thing is obviously the code style. It's okay if you don't know Go. I also started with not knowing Go as much. Take a look at other open PRs, take a look at merge PRs, look at the code style, look at the conventions, how people are working. Really save you time and save the maintainers time because uh, obviously they want to keep the style consistent because if they want to make any big changes, they don't want to go into every file and like fix style changes. Of course, it's an open source project and there are going to be a lot of differences between resources and things like that. But just take inspiration. Not saying copy paste. You can copy paste if you want. You can I copy paste a lot. You can take inspiration from my PRs, from other people's PRs. Everything that's merged obviously been reviewed. And like the last big thing is acceptance test. I think this is the main thing I'm seeing that's lacking from most PRs is the tests. Write your tests. Again, look at inspiration from other tests. If you're adding a new feature to an existing resource, that's probably easier. You can look at existing tests and make something very similar. And obviously, it would be best. Of course, not everyone can afford or have an account in standby, but run those tests for the resource, for the features you've added. That will definitely increase the chances of your PR being reviewed and merged. Um, because if you don't, there will be cases they'll probably go into many cycles of reviewing and fixing, and the test failing and fixing it again. And if you don't show that you've already tested and reviewed this, it will just lengthen the entire process.
Yeah, that's pretty good list of things to follow, uh, and well, some of these things are pretty easy to understand. As you say, just read the docs and see other pull requests, and you'll have solid base at least, right? But when you say that copy paste, then it just reminds me that there are already a lot of copy paste in this project, and AWS provider is probably the biggest one. I mean, by far the biggest one, and complexity is very big. So what I'm just thinking from user perspective and from person who try to comprehend the project, it may be not so obvious. For example, there are a lot of files, a lot of resources, a lot of code generation things laying around. As I understand, the documentation describes the normal process, right? Like how to contribute, how to write code, where to put your files, and so on, which is good. But also, what about size of the pull request? And specifically, I'm wondering, is there any difference between fixing code and fixing documentation? Will documentation or bugs or enhancement or new feature or new service, which one of these is going to be merged as soon as possible? Just, of course, it's very broad, but in general, what's your observation on this?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think from my experience, and I can't say this is definitely Hashi's internal process, but obviously bug fixes would be prioritized again for more critical services and more common services. There'll be a lot more focus on that. Again, if it's like a niche service and there's a bug there, and there's no pressure from internal stakeholders in Hashi or HashiCorp customers, obviously have a lot more pull in this than just an open source issue. Yeah, so bug fixes for critical services are going to be prioritized. Documentation fixes and additions are also prioritized because they're really easy to review and there's like you don't have to run tests and everything. They are prioritized. Enhancements to existing resources, again, by the priority of the service itself, are prioritized. And I think after that, new services and new resources for existing services and new services are at the bottom of the chain. Again, all depends on how critical that service is, because you have existing services for years that haven't been added to Terraform at all. They're just not really popular or used that much, or have some logic to even use as infrastructure as code, like I don't know, Poly or things like that, or like Alexa. But you can see like services that are being released yesterday, like the Lambda signer and the signer service that was day one support for that. And I think for EKS, it also was day one support. So it really depends how crucial the service is for HashiCorp's customers, or how HashiCorp thinks this is really would be useful for us to give support for everyone.
Yeah, upcoming features which are going to be released next week is really awesome for some people, I'm quite sure, even without going into details. But I know that AWS reInvent is crazy time of the year where a lot of new things are going to be announced, and many people are looking forward to apply all of this at once. Unfortunately, not everything will be supported instantly with Terraform AWS provider, but if you are willing to add this functionality and you want to not be blocked by the process of open source procedures established by HashiCorp, you can always fork, right? You can always fork this provider, and you can actually publish your own provider into the registry, and you can use your own copy at the same time, right? Is it common practice?
Yeah, I think since Terraform 13 and Hashi's that they added that you can add custom providers to the registry, it's been amazing, because I remember having certain features I was missing, and forking is a possibility, and I encourage you, if you're sure you need this and this is crucial for you and you can't wait for Hashi to approve this, because it can happen whenever, when Hashi deems it appropriate. It's their product at the end of the day. Feel free, as Anton said, to fork it, use it project. So it used to be a lot harder to do it because you had to maintain your fork, you had to build the provider yourself, and use it in your environment. And like, if you needed to upgrade, you had to update the fork and rebuild and do the entire process. But now, because you have the registry, you can push your fork there and use custom providers, which is like great. It's a great feature that Hashi added. You can use custom providers and find them. If you have, there's also projects that are not like just the Terraform AWS provider. There's other community providers which are great. I've been using the Kafka provider at times, and since and initially we just downloaded it as part of our pipeline when we needed it. We downloaded it and hard-coded it in our folders, but now we can just download it from the registry directly because of the feature that you can push custom providers, community providers to the registry. So yeah, definitely. This is definitely a feasible solution, and you should use it if you can.
Yeah, I think the only downside of this approach is that if you, at the end of the day, still will want to get your pull request merged into upstream project, you will probably have to rebase your project dozen of times, right? Because when something new happens, people come to review your code, and then they see like, oh, it's not up to date because it cannot be merged immediately without a rebase. So they ask you, hey, please rebase it. And you spend another time or another hour or 2 or 3 to do just rebase, to run the same tests. And you say that, okay, now I'm ready. But your train has already left, so you need to wait next cycle. For some people, it's extremely frustrating process. I know a few people, hello Andrei from Wild Apricot, who had pull requests with S3 bucket grants for more than a year. It was painful, but now we all have this feature in Terraform AWS provider, and actually a lot of people use it. Okay, so let's move on to the way how the separation between different contributors is happening inside of Terraform AWS provider. Because as I understand, there are let's say, hundreds of different resources inside of one provider. And quite obviously, as you already separated them, there are some key services like EC2, security group, S3, and so on. And then there are some niche services like storage services or game lift service or some networking services. And can you explain how this separation actually works? I mean, people who are from HashiCorp, they don't want to spend time reviewing all of this with the same level of details, right? So they want to somehow delegate this responsibility, or how it's actually working.
Yeah, absolutely. So um, obviously Hashi is prioritizing the core services we've mentioned, and you can see that in their documentation and the repo. But recently, in the last, like, I think 6 months, Hashi's been thinking how to delegate the process and have more coverage for more services that are maybe more loved by the community, but are not super important and are not super commonly used. And for that, they've been thinking of a service maintainership program. This is something that's being, it's like in pilot mode right now. And there are a few participants for that. So what they did is, for people who already had a large amounts of contributions for certain services and are continuously contributing code, because as you said, Anton, some people are contributing once or twice and then they're disappearing because they don't find it as interesting. They did their thing, they check the box and they're done, and that's okay. They contributed, and I want to thank everyone who works on open source projects. It's very important. Even the smallest things are very helpful sometimes. But for people who are doing this on a more regular basis, Hashi wants to, like, reward them from one side and give them recognition, and also have them as external resources to help. So I'm not a HashiCorp employee, but I'm part of the program of the service maintainership, and I maintain a small list of services: storage gateway, FSX, Glue, and SageMaker, and Code Artifact. And some of these are services like Code Artifact that I added that were not supported at all. I added support for that like almost day one. And other services, I just thought, okay, these are nice things to work on. So I contributed to those, and I had a lot of PRs in those, and now I'm a service maintainer. So what does that mean? It's like a big name. Basically, it means I help in the triage process of PRs related to those services. I review the PRs, and if I review and approve them, these PRs get more priority up the chain. So whenever they have more free time, they look at those PRs and approve them as well. And of course, if I submit PRs for those services and they are reviewed internally between the service maintainers, so the service maintainers review PRs outside of their responsibility. So you mentioned Kit before. Kit also reviews my PRs and I review his PRs. And when we get like mutual agreement on those, we have these are more fast track to be approved internally. So how can you also become a service maintainer yourself? Obviously, continually produce quality PRs, help review other PRs if you see, like, give people comments, just be generally involved in the community. The folks at Hashi are really perceptive, and they're really looking. There are a lot of PRs, and they're doing a great job reviewing everything and seeing who's active and who's helping, and they'll reach out to you. You can also reach out to them um, uh, via all the means that are accessible. From, you can see the documentation, their emails, their Git users, whatever. Um, and that's it. And right now it's more of a closed program, and not everyone can apply to it. But someone will reach out to you if they'll see that you're continually doing these contributions for specific services. If there's like a service you like that's being a bit left like in the cold, not being very doesn't have a lot of PRs or reviews, take responsibility, review the PRs, add PRs to those services. If Hashi sees there's like a lot of involvement from a person for a specific service, they reach out to you. And right now, Hashi is doing a lot of work on automating their pipeline process and making the review process a lot streamlined for them and for the contributors. And when they make the process a bit better, I believe they'll expand the program as well. That's what I've been talking about with people internally. They really want to see this program grow. They really want to see people more involved because they only have so many hands and limited resources to review each and every PR. Again, there's hundreds PRs open for things that are more important, less important. Sometimes important stuff might hide in like needle in the haystack of a lot of PRs that are like wanting things that are not super important for everyone.
Yeah, that's a really good observation, is that people can apply and people can send email to Simon and say, hey Simon, I'm awesome person, please give me this and this responsibility. But it's unlikely that it's going to work if you didn't prove this before. So if you commit or if you fixed once some pull request, or as it was during Hacktober Fest, 1st of October, when the whole internet was spammed with people who fixed README documentation with one line because they wanted to get t-shirt. Well, it's not going to work this way or this easily with Terraform projects in general. But if you like the t-shirt which Ilia has right now, you should really do good job, and then you will get this t-shirt. As you can see, Terraform logo in the middle is highlighted, which is good. Which means that he is active in the Terraform community. Well, a few other things which I want to add is probably related to what kind of contributions can be. It's like you can always commit code and fix or add stuff which you was missing because, well, you just want to use it immediately. But you also can be a good citizen if you just go through different issues, and if you spend your time by reading the problem or trying to suggest what can be the solution or what can person do meanwhile. For example, sometimes people don't know alternative solutions, how to write code, or maybe this issue is already duplicate of another one. If you think that this is a duplicate, you can just mention this and you will again do helpful contribution to the project, because amount of duplicates is pretty high. I know this because I maintain modules projects, and there are so many repetitive questions. The problem is that once I close this issue with an answer, then when person opens another one, he doesn't see this as an open issue. Then he thinks that this is unique issue, and he writes again instead of searching inside of closed issues. So in general, try to be a good citizen. I think it's common sense for everything what we do in open source. And at some point, service maintainership program is going to be pretty awesome. What I will probably mention to Simon, or maybe to someone from HashiCorp at some point, is that I personally enjoyed Gathering Day. When me and someone else from my employer back then, we simply spent the whole day working on Terraform AWS providers, and we were fixing different things here and there, and we were getting familiar. And I really enjoyed that day for AWS provider, and then there were some days for Azure provider and for some other things. So I think it's a really awesome initiative to my experience, at least. If we talk about frustration, because I feel that these two things, like contribution to open source, goes very close to the frustration. Like, I did something and then my code was abandoned, or my issue was not resolved, or my pull request was not merged, and so on. And you mentioned your contribution to GameLift, or we can put it as an example, any service which is not popular and service which is not going to get a significant amount of attention to be brought up to core contributors, and they will suddenly review it and merge it. What is the timeline for feature into not popular service to be actually merged? Like your game lead contribution or any other contribution which you made, let's say half year ago, will it ever be merged at all?
So I think I still have contributions that are open. I can check. I don't remember. I have like 50 PRs open, not to brag, but I still have PRs open, I think, that are almost a year old. Things like that. I think my game with PR is only 6 months old. Honestly, obviously, I understand, especially if they're first time contributing and their PR just lays there unreviewed, not even like ticked, like with likes. But again, try to get the best out of it. You've tried to be a good citizen, and thank you for that. And try to get the best of that experience. I mean, you've probably, a lot of the people I see contributing to the provider are not native Go coders, so try to see it as a good experience of learning a new language. Try seeing it as an experience of looking at a code base or a project you've never seen before, because things might be monotonous in the projects you're currently working at for your job. I see it as something that is not like my job. This is outside my job. This is something I do for education and fun. And I hope more people see it like that, and don't get angry because of they're being filled that they're ignored. And sometimes they really are ignored because, again, priorities and real life. And I hope it doesn't discourage them from going into other projects. One thing I can recommend here is try looking at other projects as well. There are projects that are a lot more maybe small scale and active. Maybe there's bigger projects that have a bit more resources to handle those things. If you're looking into contributing to open source, there's a lot of other projects. There's the modules that Anton maintains. There's a lot of issues there you can look at, and there are less like Go code oriented. If you're really good at Terraform and you're passionate about Terraform, you can look at those. This is something what I started with, and then went on to other projects. It really encouraged me because Anton was responsive and the projects were really active. So try to look at the other projects as well. Terraform AWS Provider is now the only project around GitHub, and it might help you, and maybe it will make your skills better. And you go back, maybe enhance them and make them better, and maybe then they'll be reviewed. Yeah, this is what I can say. Don't be discouraged. This is not directly against you. There's no intention from the folks at HashiCorp to leave you hanging. They just have a lot of work to do. They're very successful, and that's good.
Yeah, and as you mentioned already, the service maintainership program, which is currently in pilot inside HashiCorp, it sounds like it is really good incentive for many people to jump in and start by contributing, and then they feel that they are actually part of something. I wish I do this myself, to be honest, with some things in Terraform AWS Provider, but well, I have I have enough on my plate already, so I will dedicate this job definitely to people who are very well known, like you. So what do you think is, like we already mentioned that a lot of people are being frustrated, and do you know what is like one of things or several things which contributors should not do? just to be, again, good citizen. Do you have any things which you see people do and then you do like, oh my god, why did you do this again?
Yeah, again, I'm not speaking for Hashi, and this is my personal opinion on this, and it would be the same for any project I worked on, not even at my job. Understand that these people have a lot of other things to do, and as important as your PR may be, don't harass them or bug them or be insensitive and say not nice things. Don't comment. Even if your PR stays there for a year, it might be there for a reason that you just don't know because you're not exposed to everything. Don't comment mean things to the maintainers. They're doing their best. Um, don't comment every week and mentioning everyone. Um, please review, please review, please review. The maintainers are aware that there are open requests to review, and I'm sure they're doing their best. And sometimes I'm even tagged in things that are unrelated to me because I may have touched the resource once, and I don't work for Hashi, and I'm not a maintainer, and people just tag me, and I don't have anything to do than just either ignore them, or sometimes I comment that like a generic response that people are looking into this, and please look at the guidelines and look at the documentation, and people will reach out to you when they. So please try to be patient and look at the documentation. And obviously there's a popularity um, part to the solve. So if you look at the documentation, a lot of the features that are getting more priority and focus are things that are liked by the community. So look at the issues, like PRs that are important to you, and they will get more focus. I can guarantee that because I don't work for Hashi, but I've seen this happen. I've seen this happen a lot. Things that have blown up and are like having 100 likes, 50 likes, I don't know. And if your PR is unfortunately not like loved by the community for any reason because maybe just people don't need it as much, then you'll see like a single digit like, if at all, and obviously it will be less prioritized. And the opposite is true. If you're like seeing a PR that's not liked and it's important to you, add your opinion because Hashi can't read your mind. If it's important to you, there are obviously PRs that are laying there and are important, but they're just not getting community feedback that are important to the community. And Hashi will respond to what the community needs. This is what they usually do.
Yeah, so what you are saying is that if you have open pull request and there is not enough attention to it, feel free to engage all your Slacks, all your mailing list, all your community friends and grandmother, grandparents to open GitHub account and upvote your pull request. I see this quite often happening. Well, I don't involve my parents to upvote my issues yet, but I see this quite often in different Slacks where people say like, hey, please vote for my issue and I hope it will get some attention. Well, we do this. I mean, if we want to help this person, we go and we upvote it because we want this person to get it. So just try to upvote it and to make it sound like an important issue for everyone. One thing which was extremely problematic for many people, I don't know, maybe 2-3 months ago, maybe more, I don't remember, was related to Amazon Certificate Manager resource. That specific issue had more than 300 upvotes, and there were so many rewrites in different modules and so many hacks which worked in some cases but didn't work in another set of cases. So this is just an example of issue which was problematic at first for many people, then people raised it, then there was some discussion, some long discussion actually, and then this issue was placed inside of roadmap. So next time when HashiCorp or when Terraform AWS provider team decide what to work next, there is file called roadmap.md inside of repository, where you can actually see what's gonna to be worked on and what people are prioritizing and talking about. So I mentioned this file earlier as well, but just as a reminder, this is a good indicator of things which are going to be important in the near future. Cool. Okay, let's move on a little bit to slightly futuristic scope. As we know, Terraform AWS Provider was one of the first, well, probably it was one of the first for the reason because HashiCorp use AWS and they wanted to write something what they actually use. I completely understand them. I also do the same always. But now when there is a lot of users of this project, a lot of contributors, a lot of struggle between like how to write code. Google, for example, back then, well, I don't know back when, but maybe 1, 2, 3 years ago, I don't remember, they started a project which is called Magic Modules. The project itself is, the goal of the project is to allow Google to specify all the APIs and then run Magic Modules to generate Ansible, what Ansible has, Ansible modules, Terraform provider code, as well as for some other configuration management tool. I just don't remember names right now. And they spent significant amount of effort. I can see this from my point of view, that they wrote a lot of logic inside of this tool. But what they have right now is that you simply provide definition file, you run this tool, and you get some provider code back. So this provider code is generated for you. It's obviously not so straightforward as it may sound, because there are a lot of edge cases when things are not working as designed or as equally as designed. But if you look into Terraform AWS provider code, do you see any bottlenecks or any things where HashiCorp is putting efforts? For example, in 2 years, will we still use the same AWS CDK in Go, or will we still add another files for another resources in the same folder, which will be just impossible to work with on desktop? Or how do you think it's going to be evolutioning?
Yeah, that's a great thought about the future, looking at the state of the provider right now. As you said before, there are a lot of files to look at and a lot of functions and things like that, and not everything is magically encapsulated as you might seem. But the thing is, code in general is like an evolutionary thing. Things that were right a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, are not necessarily right now. If you look into the past before we look into the future, originally all of the provider logic was in the main Terraform repository, and because it became so big, they split it up into individual providers for GCP, for AWS, for other things. And these projects also grew since then, and you can see it now. From my experience, the first thing that I saw is that tagging logic for the entire provider right now. Originally, it was like every resource for itself became a centralized logic that is code-generated. And there's a thing that's called law of leaky abstractions, because Terraform as a layer of indirection or abstraction above the AWS Go SDK. It's not like Terraform does some sort of magic and calls like internal guys. No, they're using the Go SDK. And most of the things in Terraform use the respective Go SDK of each provider. And the thing is that even in AWS, a lot of things are not standardized. So if they're not standardized on the bottom layer, you'll see a lot of difference and pain on the upper layers. You mentioned the ACM resource. There are a lot more resources, not a lot, but there are more resources like this that their API doesn't really lend itself to the declarative fashion of Terraform, and a lot of resources do. So it's a bit strange that AWS chooses to do one resource in one way and then in another, but it's because the way that AWS is structured, and they have service teams, and they don't necessarily have common guidelines of how APIs or functions should look. And you can see the pain in organizing everything in Terraform AWS provider, because there used to be less resources and the logic was quite similar. And now you have a lot of services and resources supported, and things are getting more and more, it drifts more and more, and it gets different more and more. So a lot of effort is being put into not necessarily supporting new services and resources, but making contributions easier, making testing and like having internal layers of logic. Again, for tagging, there's a layer that's code generated based on the SDK. I know that you can this is not a secret. You can also look at those things at the provider level itself, and the code, everything is there. You have generation functions for testing. You have generated functions for listing resources. This is something that's being looked on into now. This is all to make the experience easier and make things less breakable and more predictable, because AWS API is unfortunately not as predictable as one would think, and even functions within the same resource and methods in the same resources don't really have the same logic or get the same inputs, and you have to do extra steps, unlike other resources and services. So this is a lot where the pain in Hashi stems, and sometimes they're looking into rewrite certain resources, like the ACM resources that have breaking changes between the major versions 2 and 3. And there are other open issues you can look right now. I think Elastic Cache is another resource that drifted away, and because it supports multiple versions of Redis, APIs are a bit different, and they're looking into how to rework that resource as well. So yeah, so I think the future would be to encapsulate a lot of the things that are repeating. There are a lot of repetitions in the provider. Sometimes it's like, from an architecture standpoint, sometimes it's good to abstract things. Sometimes abstractions can break and they're leaky, and it might be better to just have copies of the same logic in multiple places, because you don't know how the underlying layer may behave, and it will just break the entire abstraction. Then you have to rewrite everything, and it's painful, and it's something that they have to look into all the time, because there's a layer that is not their responsibility. They don't know how AWS will react. They don't necessarily have input. I know that Hashi's talking to AWS. Obviously, they're like a big product, is like covering AWS logic, but AWS doesn't necessarily take feedback and does what Hashi wants, because there are a lot of consumers for many products. So they can, a design decision by AWS can break something that Hashi did. And it happens. There's minor API changes that, like, responses change. The API didn't change stuff, but the responses changed, and it broke something. From my experience, like lately, I think I've been working with FSX, and they added a new like status, and now a waiter function inside the provider broke.
Yeah.
Because it's not aware of that thing.
Yeah, for me, last week was AppSync. So AppSync was working fine, and then suddenly stopped working, and it worked like occasionally for some people, but not always anymore. And there is also open discussion on that. So yeah, that's even if we say that, okay, we pin version, we use the same API, the same SDK, we still don't control what's going to happen inside of AWS. Well, API is the same, but not exactly behavior. Okay, so, well, it's pretty good to have this conversation going, but we still have we have a few minutes left. I want to ask. So I asked about future and how you think the whole development will be improved or maybe simplified One thing which I want to mention, which is not entirely related to Terraform AWS provider, but it's more related to the way how documentation is structured on the registry. Right now, if you go to documentation, you will see that documentation may contain code which is not best practice for Terraform 0.13. It may still be using, let's say, long syntaxes inside of values. So you may ask, like, why this documentation is not updated at the same time as providers. And it's usually, as far as I understand, and Ilia can maybe say something more about it, but when people write pull requests, they have to take care not only about feature, but also about how this documentation page will look like, right? So you have to update documentation at the same time. And at some point, I think a little bit too many people started complaining about this, that people from HashiCorp decided to make a tool which will automatically generate documentation based on provider's code, which is mentioned inside of this resource. I don't know exactly how far is it right now, but the initial implementation of it was pretty promising, I would say. So the point is that when you open your pull request, you will not have to update your documentation files so much. Some chunks of the code will be taken from your source code as well. So you have documentation, and you have static documentation, but inside of this static documentation you can embed real pieces of the code from real Terraform provider code or provider resources. Do you know anything about that? How it's what's going to be improved there in documentation side?
So actually, from the side of documentation generation, I haven't heard anything, at least not from the AWS provider side. I know that they've improved their like GitHub Actions side to really lint the documentation properly, and I know they're planning to eventually also on each like CI/CD cycle they do is to run tests against the examples and the documentation part. So that should improve eventually. But regarding doc generation, I'm not aware of any effort in that space. It could be helpful, but from my experience, again, sometimes a lot of the things that I've been doing at least is copying a lot from the AWS documentation, but sometimes AWS documentation is not the best, and they're also improving it. But at a given point in time, when I'm working on a PR, I take a lot of like 90% of like documentation I use is verbatim AWS documentation, and sometimes I add more things for it to be more clear to users, or sometimes there's also custom attributes that are not directly related to AWS to like glue things more together, that it will work more cohesively, that are not part of the AWS API itself. So I guess documentation generation there, and it might really work, but in some cases there are things that needed to be added extra on top of that to make it more clear.
Yeah, absolutely. So the working code is already a little bit too late. You have to explain how things are connected, and you have to write it in plain English sometimes. So I found the name of the project is terraform-plugin-docs. I can put this link into description to this video, and this is exactly the repository which contains tool to create Terraform plugin documentation. I don't know how much, like how complete is the whole project, but well, it's not complete because it says this experimental repository. Well, but you always know that everything what is experimental is already good for production, right? That's that's how we do it. Cool.
I think if you're creating your own custom provider for any reasons, and there are a lot of great community providers, I guess you can look at this project. It could be very helpful because AWS is a bit problematic and complicated, and not everything can be so simple. If you have a small scale, you're just starting and you want to improve your documentation, you can probably use this one to save you a lot of time.
Yeah, and as you mentioned earlier, is that you got some inspiration from Kafka provider. I think I looked into that Kafka provider, and recently I looked into this Docker provider, which I mentioned at the beginning of our discussion. And those providers are extremely easy to understand the basic concepts. You don't have to know like what is Terraform specific, what is legacy, what is related to just AWS. You have very easy process of following SDK, Terraform plugin, Terraform core, and you can easily understand how things are related. So I also highly recommend to look into much smaller providers if you want to understand how things are actually working. Because AWS is probably the first provider which was created, and it has a lot of complicated things in it.
Yeah, the Terraform SDK really improved over at least the last year I've been looking into it. A lot of helper functions, a lot of testing frameworks were introduced. So if you have any reason or any need to create your own custom provider, obviously look at the Terraform SDK. There are a lot of helpful tools there to get you started, and a lot of boilerplate has been already taken care of. Yeah, again, as Anton said, you can look at the smaller scale providers and see how they're implemented using all of these things.
Yeah, I think in general the amount of components which you need to understand is rather similar. Is that you need to authenticate somehow, you need to perform some CRUD operations, you need to manage internal state somewhere, somehow. So once you understand these basic things, you can apply them to other more complicated things. Great. I think we are almost out of time for the today stream. I have few things which I want to ask you at the end, and and I will ask you, and then I will ask audience. So from your point of view, as an active contributor, do you have like one sentence which you want to pass to next generation? Well, you get the point. Anyway, so any last minute suggestions to people who are willing to contribute, and now they watch your talk, and then they think like, oh yeah, now I'm gonna to do these awesome things, and it's okay, I will wait for a year before my pull request is gonna to be merged. Anything like that?
Yeah, if you already tagged me as a older generation contributor, obviously you can look at my contributions. I have a few. Look at the style of the things I do, take inspiration. You can hit me up, ask me questions, mention me on GitHub, add me on LinkedIn, and like I'll always be happy to answer specific questions if you have any. If you open your PR and you have like a specific technical question, something's not working, feel free to mention me, and I'll do my best to respond quickly. I'll be happy to review your PRs to help them like be better and more ready for being reviewed by maintainers. Yeah, read the documentation again.
Cool.
It's very helpful. Yeah.
So RTFM is the motto of being successful in contribution to the open source. Well, that's RTFM applies only to the project where documentation exists, right? If documentation doesn't exist, then there is nothing to read, and it's slightly different. Okay, thanks a lot for this answer. Now I want to ask people who are watching this, and specifically people who are willing to understand how to contribute this, but in action. What I propose to Ilia is that in the near future we run similar stream, but the focus will be exclusively on getting things done, so we can figure out how to make this end to end, and we'll literally ask Ilia to do something, and we can ask questions, and we can maybe have some answers to our questions as we are progressing. What I'm thinking is that we can figure out a simple resource or simple feature or something small what we can do during, let's say, 1 hour, and we can see how this is done and where Ilia is actually looking for help or how he writes code and so on. So if you have any opinion on that one, please leave a comment, and we can talk about this in the comments, or you can contact me. There is a link to my Twitter, GitHub, LinkedIn on the bottom of the screen. And I will also mention all social connections like GitHub, LinkedIn to Ilia in the description to this video, so that everyone can contact you if they are having anything to say. On that note, I think we are almost finished. Last thing which I want to mention, that 11th of December, so which is in 2 weeks, we will have Sebastian Hoffman, who is creator of Terraform CDK, or CDK for Terraform. I honestly always confuse these two words and who is for what. So Terraform for CDK or CDK is for Terraform. Anyway, Terraform CDK creator is going to be joining us in 2 weeks on the same Your Weekly Dose of Terraform channel. So feel free to join us, and always remember to bring your questions. As I think today there were no questions from people. Maybe that's because I didn't announce it that people can ask questions. But anyway, if there are questions, guys, please don't hesitate, because you are. Oh no, there was question. Oh my god. Let's see. There was question. Last week I got my first very minor PR merged the same day. How can I dive deeper to contribute on bigger stuff? Issues I am able to target get resolved quicker, and then I can raise my hand. That's unusual. Let's whitelist this person.
Yeah, it's a good question. Sometimes I also have the experience of, I had the awful experience of looking at an issue, writing a PR, testing it completely, and then looking that the PR has already popped up like with the same solution, maybe even better looking than what I did. And I already did the work and like had the experience, and now someone else already did that. So it's good to have a lot of hands wanting to help. Don't get discouraged by that. At least you got the experience of learning something new. And yeah, look at the issues, filter them by the amount of attention they have. Some things are more simple. Sometimes some things are more complicated. Ideally, I always look at newer issues because they're usually like more simple to look at, and historical things are usually more complicated if they didn't get picked up by now. So like daily or even a weekly, you can just go into the repo, filter the issues by what's new, maybe even filter by a service you're more interested in. Everything is labeled properly. Maybe you just want to look at like a documentation PR to add some documentation. That's great as well. And that's it. This is what I can say for that.
Yeah, that's for people who are disappointed with sound. I have good news for you guys. Today is Black Friday, and I'm going to buy a new mouse. So not everyone will hear me clicking around, but well, sound and streaming software are way too complicated for me. So, but at least I'm able to solve printer. Well, regarding next time with Ilia or any person of this kind, it's always interesting to see the same work as you doing when doing code reviews. Exactly, I'm completely for that myself. So for that one, we need to open more pull requests for Ilia, and we will be sitting and watching him doing reviews, and we can ask like, why isn't it obvious that it's what it's doing? Okay, good. So
yeah, great. It would be a pleasure. It would be a pleasure to do that.
Great. And please buy new mic. Well, this mic is not so bad, but occasionally something is not working. So we'll see. Okay. On that note, I want to thank you very much, Ilia, for your time and for your knowledge which you shared with us today. And I'm looking forward to have you next time. And I'm sure that more people who watch this after today's recording, they will be able to understand that things are actually not as complicated, and they just have to be patient and do your best. And that's what we do, right? You and me are not robots. We are humans at the end of the day. So we will figure out what to go through next time. And yeah, on that note, thanks everyone for watching, and have a good day or the rest of the day, and enjoy. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Anton.